When the story first broke, few believed it was real. But within hours, confirmation from defense officials turned speculation into panic. China had halted all titanium exports to the United States, abruptly cutting off the lifeblood of America's military aviation industry. Overnight, the world's most advanced fighter jet, the F-35, became a grounded symbol of Washington's vulnerability. According to Reuters and Defense News, Beijing's decision came in direct response to escalating U.S. trade sanctions and arms sales to Taiwan. China, the world's largest producer of aerospace-grade titanium, quietly issued a state directive halting all sales to hostile foreign nations. The move instantly paralyzed global supply lines, sending shockwaves through defense contractors and Pentagon planners alike. The timing couldn't have been worse. U.S. military production was already stretched thin by rising material costs and labor shortages. Lockheed Martin, the manufacturer of the F-35, relies on titanium alloys for the jet's frame, landing gear, and armor plating, components that cannot be replaced or re-engineered overnight. Without China's titanium, production would slow to a crawl within weeks. Titanium isn't just metal, explained a senior analyst at Jane's Defense Weekly. It's the backbone of every modern aircraft. Without it, America's air superiority literally can't take off. Inside the White House, the mood was described as shocked disbelief. President Donald Trump, who had boasted of rebuilding U.S. manufacturing strength, was caught completely off guard. His trade advisors had long warned that China controlled over 60% of the world's titanium refining capacity. But the gravity of that dependence was never fully acknowledged until now. The Pentagon's initial response was frantic. Emergency meetings were held with Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and Northrop Grumman executives to assess how much titanium was left in reserve. The answer was grim. Less than 3 months' worth. Production lines for not just the F-35 but also the F-15EX, B-21 Raider bomber, and even certain naval vessels would soon stall. Meanwhile, China's state media gloated over the move, calling it a strategic correction, and claiming it was time the West learned who controls the materials that power their war machines. Economists dubbed it the titanium trap, a quiet yet devastating counter to decades of U.S. sanctions and tariffs. On Capitol Hill, lawmakers demanded answers. How did the Pentagon allow this level of dependency? One senator fumed during a televised hearing. Defense officials admitted the uncomfortable truth. While the U.S. once mined and refined its own titanium, those industries were outsourced decades ago, largely to cut costs. As titanium prices tripled on the global market, NATO allies began to feel the strain too. The United Kingdom, Italy, and Japan, all partners in the F-35 program, scrambled to find alternative suppliers, but none had the scale or purity required for military-grade production. For decades, the U.S. believed its strength came from technology, innovation, and global dominance. But this crisis revealed a new reality. Power now lies not in who builds the weapons, but in who supplies the materials. And in that equation, Beijing was holding all the cards. Within 24 hours of China's titanium ban, the crisis had escalated into what Pentagon officials described as a full-scale defense emergency. The assembly lines that built America's most advanced fighter jets, bombers, and naval aircraft were grinding to a halt. For the first time in decades, Washington wasn't facing a military strike. It was facing a material siege. At Lockheed Martin's Fort Worth facility, engineers watched production targets collapse in real time. Titanium sheets used for the F-35's airframe had been delayed indefinitely, and every alternative supplier reported months-long backlogs. Boeing's manufacturing teams in St. Louis faced the same fate, warning that titanium reserves for the FA-18 and KC-46 programs could run out by midsummer. Even NASA quietly admitted that several space exploration missions could be delayed. Inside the Pentagon, the mood turned from disbelief to urgency. Trump's defense team called an emergency session of the National Security Council, with high-ranking officials from the Departments of Commerce, Energy, and Defense gathered in the Situation Room. Their mission: find a way to keep the military running before the titanium pipeline ran dry. According to Politico, the Defense Logistics Agency revealed that the U.S. had only 10 weeks of high-grade titanium stockpiled, nowhere near enough to sustain full-scale aircraft production. The U.S. Geological Survey confirmed that while America possesses titanium ore reserves, its refining and alloying capabilities had been outsourced decades earlier, primarily to China, Russia, and Kazakhstan. "We're trapped in our own supply chain," one defense official told Reuters. "We built our military power on materials we don't control." Trump, known for his fiery rhetoric, went on camera that evening with a mix of anger and defiance. Standing before the White House press corps, he declared, "China has crossed a red line. The United States will rebuild its defense supply chain, no matter the cost." He announced the creation of Operation Steel Resolve, a crash initiative to revive domestic titanium mining and fast-track alternative supply agreements with Australia and Canada. But analysts were quick to point out that such efforts would take years, not weeks. "The infrastructure to produce aerospace titanium safely and efficiently doesn't exist here anymore," said a former Boeing metallurgist. "You can't rebuild it overnight, even with all the money in the world." Meanwhile, China's move had triggered a domino effect across global defense networks. European defense firms, from BAE Systems in the UK to Leonardo in Italy, saw contracts delayed as material shortages rippled outward. NATO partners began pressuring Washington for emergency shipments from dwindling U.S. reserves. In Asia, Japan and South Korea initiated joint talks with Australia to secure regional supply chains independent of China. The Financial Times called it a geopolitical masterstroke disguised as an export pause. While the U.S. scrambled for titanium, Beijing quietly strengthened its diplomatic ties with nations rich in rare minerals, tightening its grip on the world's industrial lifelines. By week's end, Pentagon analysts reached a chilling conclusion. China had achieved with a trade decision what no military adversary could accomplish: grounding America's air power without firing a single shot. As the titanium crisis deepened, the shock spread across the global defense network like wildfire. Within weeks, fighter jet programs were delayed, military budgets rewritten, and global alliances shaken. What had started as a supply dispute had now triggered a defense meltdown on a planetary scale, one that left even America's most trusted allies scrambling for answers. The Financial Times reported that NATO production targets for next-generation aircraft were quietly suspended. European defense ministers held emergency summits seeking alternative metal sources from Norway, India, and Australia, but global capacity simply couldn't meet the demand. Japan's Mitsubishi FX fighter program stalled. South Korea's KF-21 production was postponed indefinitely. Even Britain's Tempest program, once touted as the future of Western air dominance, announced unavoidable material shortages. It wasn't just planes. Titanium is critical to submarines, missiles, and armor plating. And now, nearly every major weapons manufacturer on Earth was facing the same roadblock. It's the single largest industrial chokehold in modern history, a defense economist told Bloomberg. One nation, China, has effectively frozen the engine of Western defense. Beijing, for its part, played the situation with icy precision. The Chinese Ministry of Commerce issued a brief statement claiming the export suspension was for domestic industrial adjustments. Yet Chinese state media celebrated the move openly. Global Times headlines read, "The West built its weapons on Chinese metal. Now the debt is due." Inside Washington, the panic had given way to grim realization. Trump's team began negotiating emergency trade deals with Australia, Canada, and even Kazakhstan to restart titanium imports. But mining and refining at military grade was no small feat. Analysts estimated it could take 18 to 24 months for new facilities to reach usable output, far too long to sustain uninterrupted defense production. Meanwhile, the geopolitical implications were seismic. Russia, itself a major titanium producer, saw an opportunity to exploit the chaos. Moscow announced a strategic export pact with Beijing, effectively consolidating the world's two largest titanium supplies under one axis. Analysts at Stratfor warned that this move marks the beginning of a new material-based Cold War. Global stock markets reflected the fear. Aerospace stocks tumbled, defense indexes slid, and gold surged above $3,000 per ounce as investors sought safe havens. European leaders pleaded for calm, but the damage was done. The U.S. had been blindsided, not by missiles or tanks, but by the metals that build them. As one Pentagon insider confessed to Politico, We've spent decades preparing for wars of firepower, but not for wars of minerals. And that's exactly what this is. The age of titanium had revealed an uncomfortable truth. In the New World Order, the nation that controls the materials controls the might. And for now, that nation was China.